Namaste. Welcome to The Explainer. Go ahead and take a deep breath, settle in, because today we are going on a really fascinating psychological journey. We're diving straight into the architecture of the human brain to track exactly how our minds react to different, escalating levels of pressure. Literally the full spectrum of the mind, from the everyday exhaustion of modern life, right down to the grip of ancient paranoia.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our map for today. We'll kick things off with everyday mental stress, or rozmarakakatanav. From there, we'll cross into dread and unknown mysteries. Then the search for the Mrityunjay Amrit, followed by obsession and terrifying madness, and we'll wrap up with the truth of the beating heart. Let's get right to it.
Section 1. Everyday mental stress. Rozmaraka mansik tanav and real-world burnout.
So, to really understand how the mind breaks, we need a baseline. And for that, let's look at Brian Rees. He's a software engineer in New York, and his experience with mental fatigue is honestly something so many of us can relate to. You know, it's usually external pressures that trigger a mental collapse, right? For Brian, it was the perfect storm. His inbox was just overflowing with brand commitments, HR suddenly dropped the bomb that he couldn't film his vlogs at the office anymore, and on top of that, he was battling severe acne using Accutane, which brought on some really heavy mood swings. Add all that up, and then a tragic loss of a grandparent right around the new year. It was a lot. But here's the thing. Recovery doesn't just happen by magic, it happens through structure. Brian managed to regain his mental clarity by building a personal iOS app, eating these high-protein, chef-crafted meals from CookUnity, and getting outside on his cowboy electric bike.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how Brian systematically reclaimed his headspace by focusing strictly on what he could control. When his external world got chaotic, he anchored himself. He started taking more initiative at work, pitching new ideas as a senior engineer. He locked into a rigid fitness routine, hitting 6 to 10 reps of heavy compound lifts. He even poured his creative energy into coding a superfluid SwiftUI project management app from scratch on Figma. And absolutely crucial here, he actually took the time to step away from his screens and explore the Hudson River piers. Step by structured step, he literally rebuilt his reality.
Moving to Section 2. Dread and Unknown Mysteries. Khauf aur anjane rahasya.
But what happens when the pressure isn't just a crazy inbox or physical fatigue? What happens when fear literally blurs the lines of our reality? This timeline takes us on a pretty terrifying descent into the unknown, drawn straight from the haunting Hindi folklore of Berhampur village in Madhya Pradesh. Notice how history and the present day just collide here. 400 years ago, a young man named Madan completely ignored his father's warnings, wandered into the Ghan jungle, the dense forest, and encountered the horrifying Nashir Molo. Now fast forward to present day, 9 a.m. A lab worker named Meghna wakes up in Delhi completely haunted by this recurring nightmare of a dripping green liquid and a giant terrifying bird. Driven by this wild curiosity, she and her colleague Yushata hop on a 5-hour bus ride straight into the heart of this eerie folklore. And by midnight, they're sneaking into Raja Surajban's ancient palace. It's crazy how human curiosity just drives us directly into the path of ancient dangers.
Okay, I want you to just picture this. You're standing in a pitch-black forest, completely alone, and slowly you hear these heavy footsteps, and a rhythmic, guttural chant echoing through the trees. Bam, bam, bosh. This is the terrifying mantra of the Nishir Molo. Folklore describes them as 4 horrific men carrying a coffin on their shoulders with glowing red eyes. And the legend? It says anyone who even looks at them is instantly doomed.
Section 3. The Search for Mrityunjay Amrit. A Dangerous Quest. So you're probably wondering, why on earth would anyone actively seek out a place shrouded in that kind of terror? Well, it's because the human mind is incredibly susceptible to obsession. For Meghna and Ishita, that obsession was the Mrityunjay Amrit. It translates to this mythic immortality nectar. The ancient texts they dug up described it as a glowing green liquid that only drips from the branches of one specific tree during a full moon. And it was that exact imagery, the dripping green liquid, the terrifying guardian bird, that had been hijacking Meghna's dreams night after night. It literally drove these 2 lab partners to lie to their professor just to track down this village.
You can see how, step by step, they get pulled deeper down the rabbit hole. First, it was just finding that old folklore book in their modern Delhi lab. Then, they actually arrive at the village, and it's like their mere presence triggers this unnatural, freezing storm. They manage to get a room with the village chief, but the dread is dialed up instantly when a sacred temple lamp just inexplicably blows out. And then comes the ultimate mistake, sneaking out at midnight with the chief's son, Anuj.
totally unaware that out there in the dark, the villagers are already running into the terrifying Nashir Molo, and their coffin is opening.
Which brings us to a major turning point in our explainer. We've talked about external monsters and ancient curses, but I have a serious question for you. What is actually scarier? The supernatural ghosts waiting for us out in the dark? Or the terrifying demons lurking inside our own minds? Because when the mind fractures, the real horror comes from within.
Section 4. Obsession and terrifying madness. Total mental collapse.
We are stepping into the absolute darkest phase of our spectrum now, looking at Edgar Allan Poe's classic, The Telltale Heart. The narrator just keeps repeating with this desperate intensity, "Is it not clear that I am not mad?" It's the ultimate chilling irony. I mean, this guy uses his incredible patience, his careful planning, and his supposedly heightened senses as undeniable proof of his sanity, all while he is calmly, methodically explaining his plan to murder an old man, a man he actually claims to love. It's a perfect example of a mind rationalizing total madness. So, the crucial point to understand here is the number 7. This was not some crime of sudden passion. For 7 long nights, at exactly midnight, the narrator slowly pushed open the old man's bedroom door. And he wasn't looking to rob him. He was fixated on one thing, and one thing only: the old man's pale blue vulture eye. But for 7 nights, the eye was closed. And in the narrator's completely twisted logic, he couldn't commit the murder because he didn't hate the man himself, he only hated the evil eye.
And this brilliantly illustrates what happened on the 8th night. The narrator made a tiny noise, and the old man sprang up in bed, crying out, "Who's there?" The darkness in that room was pitch black, and for 1 whole hour the narrator stood there, perfectly, totally still, didn't move a single muscle. He just listened as the old man sat up in sheer, agonizing terror, knowing full well that death was standing right there in the room with him.
Section 5. Truth of the Beating Heart, where paranoia meets reality.
Let's move to the climax and see how this builds, because the suspense in that dark room is suffocating. After an hour of dead silence, the narrator slightly opens his lantern, just enough to let a single, incredibly thin ray of light escape. And it lands perfectly on that wide-open, pale blue vulture eye. But the eye isn't actually what drives him to kill. Thanks to his supposedly heightened hearing, he starts to hear this low, dull, quick sound, kind of like a watch wrapped in cotton. It's the furious, terrified beating of the old man's heart. And that sound grows so loud in his ears that it whips him into a total frenzy, driving him to finally attack and smother the old man. What happens next is a chilling cover-up that really highlights the terrifying duality of his fractured mind. After the extreme, chaotic violence of the murder, he executes a flawlessly silent cleanup. He dismembers the body, pulls up 3 floorboards, hides the pieces, and doesn't leave a single drop of blood behind. So when 3 police officers knock on the door at 4 a.m. because a neighbor heard a scream, the narrator is the absolute picture of smug, smiling confidence. He even has the nerve to place his own chair directly over the hidden floorboards while he chats with the cops.
But here is the catch. The mind that constructs such a perfect illusion is also entirely capable of destroying it. As he sits there chatting, the narrator begins to hear it again, that low, dull, quick sound, and it's getting louder and louder. He starts pacing the room, he's talking faster, but the smiling police officers don't seem to notice a thing. And that is when his sanity completely shatters. He realizes the sound isn't coming from the floorboards at all. It's a massive auditory hallucination. Driven totally mad by his own overwhelming guilt and paranoia, manifesting as this beating heart, he violently tears up the floorboards and confesses, screaming, "Why does his heart not stop beating?"
Which brings us to our final thought. Think about the journey we just took. We started with Brian Ruiz battling everyday burnout by imposing strict structure on his reality. We watched folklore characters march blindly into the terrors of Berhampur, and we saw a murderer's flawless plan completely unravel over a sound that existed entirely inside his own head. When our minds possess the absolute power to create our reality, to make us see a vulture eye, or hear immortality nectar dripping, or feel the deafening beat of a dead man's heart, who among us can truly say what is real and what is madness? Namaste, and thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning your reality